Shut up and sit down.
Greetings, fellow Earth travelers. Obliques here from my Mechanism test world, and today we're going to take a look at Mechanism transportation. How y'all doing today? So, I get this question quite frequently. That is, Obliques, I was building this Mechanism thing, and I just can't get it to work because it's not, sending either items or fluids or energy where it needs to go. So today we're going to take a look at all the different transport methods within Mechanism and how to make them work effectively in your world. So Mechanism has 5 different transport devices, pipes, cables, whatever you want to call them. First and foremost, we have fluid, so we can deal with water and lava and brine and lithium and all the different various fluids we have in Mechanism, or just in Minecraft in general. That's this pipe here. We've got item transport, so you can see I'm transporting some birch leaves down there into the trash. Then we have gas transport. So all of your gaseous material, this happens to be DT fuel, but it could be oxygen or hydrogen, lots of gases in Mechanism. Then we have heat, which you can see in this line here, and that's going to be very important in Mechanism. Is we use heat for a lot of different things, and this is the pipe we use to transport the heat. And then of course we have energy through these universal cables here. Now, it's easy, they add several things in Mechanism to help kind of differentiate the pipes or the cables so that you can see which one's which. Now, if we look at these energy cables, you'll see they got the dashed line, but they also have, at endpoints not connected to machines, they'll have this little lightning bolt here. Now, where they do connect to the machine, you're not going to get that, but down here where it's not connected, you will, so you'll know that's a power line. And it's this smaller form factor cable, so there's 3 of the smaller form factors, 1, 2, 3, and there's 2 of the larger form factor cables. Another one of the small form factor cables is heat, and that's differentiated, and it still has the dashed line. This is kind of in the middle. These are kind of more centered, so that this is the pixel where they would be on the heat or on the energy, but this is the pixel where they are in the heat. They're a little more central, where these are more in the center of this half of the pipe. But you have this nice little flame logo there that makes it really obvious. So the gases, it's moved further to the outside, the stripe line, and we've got this caution symbol there that tells us these are gas pipes. Now, of the 2 larger types, we've got item transport and fluid transport. You see the item transport has the dashed lines all the way around. The fluid transport has solid lines all the way around. So that's how you differentiate those 2. And that's one of the most common problems I see when people say they can't make their stuff work, and I go look at what they've done. They've simply connected the wrong type of cable. They're trying to get gas out with a fluid pipe or a heat pipe because they look, similar, but it's just not going to work. You have to connect the correct pipe. So the first thing you're going to need in Mechanism is this guy, and it's called a configurator. This is your do-it-all tool. You are absolutely going to need one of these very, very early on. Now you can see this one I've got here has no power in it, and this is how it's going to come when you build it. So we need to get some power, and the easiest way to get power this early game in Mechanism is one of these heat generators. Now these guys do not produce a lot of power, but they do produce power. The easiest way to do it is take a heat generator, plop it on the ground, plug in 4 holes around it just like this, and put a lava source square on the top, which is what I have right here. You can kind of see right here the heat generator poking out. If I right click, I can get to the heat generator, and you can see it is producing none right now because it's actually full. If I take this full configurator out and put this configurator in, you see we're sucking the power down. You see it producing a whopping 1 RF a tick, which ain't nothing but it is something. Now you can produce more if you have some surface lava or a lava pit down in the ground somewhere you can get a hold of. And you just feed this guy some lava buckets. He will produce power much, much quicker and allow you to produce almost 30 RF a tick. So you can get enough power to charge up your configurator with just a couple buckets of lava real quick. But if you leave this sitting here with lava on top of it, it's going to passively generate while you're out and about doing other things. You can also use, fairly early game some of these low-end solar panels, but you are going to need some other Mechanism machines to make those. So now let's talk about actually moving items around. Once you have your configurator, now like I said, this is the be-all end-all tool of Mechanism, and it does all the things. And we need to walk through what all those things are, because it is a little bit confusing for a lot of people. Now I've got a basic setup here where we're pulling cobblestone out of this creative bin, and we're putting it into this crusher. It's smashing it up and sending it down here to this ultimate bin in the form of gravel. So you'll see this number will tick up here in just a second once it gets a new piece of gravel. And we're powering it from this windmill using our basic universal cables. Now, kind of one of the nice things with Mechanism and power-wise is you don't really need to configure power on these guys unless you have a very specific instance where you don't want to backfeed power. There's really no configuration needed. You just plug in the cables and they just work. But there is configuration needed for machines or blocks that are outside of Mechanism, or ones that are inside of Mechanism but do not have the default settings that you want. For example, this creative bin does not want to output material when in its natural state. So if I just connect a cable to it, the cable will connect to it, but you see nothing happens. No marching ants shooting across the cable showing that cobblestone is moving. And that's because we haven't told it to extract, because this machine does not extract by default. We have to force it to do so. So that's where our configurator comes in. So let's walk through the settings on the configurator. First and foremost, you want to shift to change the settings. And often I find that people have shifted and changed the settings accidentally, which is part of the reason why it's not doing what they want it to be able to do. I want you to look down here right above the hotbar, and you got to look fast because it's only on the screen for a split second. But I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to rotate my mouse wheel, and I'm going to rotate it downward, and it's going to change. You saw it just flash for a second, the word wrench. I'm going to put it back to, and I'm going to bring it back down. You'll see wrench again. Back and back down again, wrench. If I go down beyond that, it goes to rotate. Down again is empty. Down again is configure heat, configure energy, configure gases, fluids, items, and we're back to wrench. So the mouse wheel does work in the up way, going forward, or in the down way to go backward. So if you know where things are, you can go up or down to get to where you need to be, but you do have to be holding shift to get there. So I'll see people set it to say empty, and then they're trying to configure stuff and things aren't configuring. Well, that's why. And while it's not 100% required, I do recommend setting it to the appropriate type of cable that you're working with. So we know we're transporting items through this logistical transporter. To transport items, we want to make sure we're on, or to configure it, we want to make sure we're on configure items. Now, when we look here at the cable, you see a large box, wireframe outline right here. If I mouse over this end, you see a much skinnier one right here, and then another skinny one right here. Everything from this line right there all the way over to the edge of this machine is a single cable segment. So there's 3 different configurable areas of that cable segment. The short area, the big area, and another short area. So if we go to the next segment, there's a short, a big, and a short. You see that? We go to the next segment, a short, a big, and a short. See how that is? So you want to make sure you're in the correct segment when you're configuring, and this is a huge problem I see with a lot of people. They'll come up and they'll try to configure right here. This does configure something, but it's not what you want to configure, and it tends to be a problem for you. So this big section configures color. If I hold shift, again I have to be holding shift, and I configure it, you'll see it turns blue. And you'll see I get a notification of that in the bottom left hand corner. Do it again, it goes to green, aqua, red, purple. People think this is setting it to input and output. It is not. So if you mistakenly turn it blue, make sure you cycle it back to none, or you're going to cause yourself some issues unless you know what you're doing with these colors. Now these colors are super useful, very, very handy, really cool, but it's too detailed for me to get into in this video, or this video is going to be an hour long. So if you want to see a video on the colors, let me know in the down yonder. I can work up a whole video on the different colors. What we want to configure inputs and outputs is this little tiny section here at the end. This is where we want to make sure we're pointing our configurator. Now if I hold shift and click, things have happened. It says connection type changed to push. Now if you look at it, that's kind of like an arrow pointing into the box, right? And that's exactly what it is. It's telling you it's going to shove items into the box. Well, that's not what we want. We want to get items out of the box. So to do that, we shift, click again, and now we've got export. And if you look on top, it looks like an arrow pointing in this way. That is telling us it's going to pull items out and shove them into the system. And we see our little marching ants running across into our crusher and getting crushed, turning into gravel and sitting on down the line. Now, one other thing I see people do sometimes is they go too far and they click it a third time and it turns to none. And they don't know how to reconnect these. They come over here and they try to connect and it turns blue. Again, with the whole color problem, right? If you make the mistake, just go back to none, cycle through all the colors, get back to none. What you want to do is hit the configurator on this very end right here. So again, shift, click, and now you're reconnected and you can cycle back through all the different settings. So again, any machine that doesn't allow for configuration within the machine, such as these bins, or any machine that's outside of Mechanism, or any storage device outside of Mechanism, you need to configure your cables properly, either pushing in or pulling out where necessary. But a lot of Mechanism machines actually have logic inside the machine that it becomes non-issue. We'll look at that in a minute. So, again, you don't see any, it's not set to pull here because the logic is inside the machine itself. We don't need that. Well, like I said, we'll take a look at that when we get over here. All right, so one other thing to be cautious of is cable connectivity of different substances. So I've got a machine here called an electrolytic separator, and all it's doing is taking water from this little pump right here, which is getting power from these solar panels, and it's pushing the water into the mechanical pipe and shoving it into the machine. The machine is then taking that water and turning it into hydrogen and oxygen, which you can see coming out through these gas pipes. We can tell they're gas pipes because of the little symbol on them. And then, of course, it's getting its power underneath through this basic universal cable way down here. Now, in older versions of Mechanism, if these two pipes were within a one block gap, so if I tried to bring it up right here and bring it over instead of up here, these two would merge and create a fouled gas. It would not be the gas you were looking for anymore. You'd basically have to tear out all the lines, rebuild the whole thing again where they weren't touching. That was a big issue. That has since been corrected in newer versions of Mechanism, but I would still recommend that you keep your cables separate with a one block air gap between all of your cables. It's just good practice. But you can see over here they have fixed it. I have a tank of hydrogen here and a tank of oxygen here. If I just grab a pressurized cable and try to connect the two, in the past they would connect and merge the liquid or the gases. Now they won't. You see how it splits like that? If I try to come up and over, it says nope. If I try to come out, it says nope, I'm not going to connect them. I'm going to think about it, but I'm not going to let it happen. So that's kind of a handy feature that they've done. But I would still recommend that you keep that one block air gap between your cables. Like if you needed to come this way, do this. That way there's no chance of having that problem if there's ever a glitch or a lag spike or something along those lines. One thing Mekansim does really well is show you what's inside all the cables and pipes. These are some of the gases that Mekansim has brought into the game, and you can see, while these are all different gases, they're all different colors. So you can, at a quick glance, see what's what. So we've got our oxygen and hydrogen down here. Then we get into like chlorine, that bright yellow. We get into deuterium here. We've got tritium here. We've got DT fuel, lithium. So all the different colors of all the different gases. So you kind of at a quick glance see what's what, which is really nice. So now I want to talk to you about the connectivity with the machines. We talked about connecting to machine or to devices outside of Mekansim or ones inside of Mekansim that don't have intelligence to them, to where you can go in and say, I want to do export on this side, import on this side, and all that. You can do that with a cable here. With Mekansim machines, it's a bit different. You can do it within the machine itself. So I'm going to plop this enrichment chamber down, and you'll see it connects on this side, and it connects on this side, but it does not connect on this side. And I'm going to hang on to this because we're going to do some more with it in a minute. There's two ways to do this configuration. One, you can do it from within the machine itself. So if I right-click the machine, I can click on Side Config, and then I can make all the configurations from here. The other way to do it is with your configurator. And I'm going to show you both. We're going to go through the Side Config first. So if I click on Side Config, I can see that it's inputting from the top and outputting from the side. Well, we don't have the input coming from the top, we have it coming from over here, so I need to change this. So I'm going to left click, now it's output, now it's energy, now it's none. And then on this side I want it to be input, so I'm going to left click, and now it's set to input. You saw it connect, and you see the little marching ants come rolling down the cable, filling up the machine, and you see it processing. Now what you're not going to see is it output any items. It's going to hold on to those items. So it's made the gold, turn the gold ore into 2 gold dust, but it's not outputting. And that reason being is the side config is still set to eject off. We do need to turn the auto eject on. So I'm going to click this little almost padlock looking thing, and you see it shot the items down the line into our energized smelter. It's going to smelt the dust into ingots and shoot them over here into our compact storage drawer. Now remember, this is not from Mekansim. This is from the mod called Storage Drawers. Mekansim can absolutely work with it, but we had to set it to push. We had to use our configurator, click on the little tiny end, remember, not the big section, but the little tiny section. And we had to set it to push, so that tells the cable when the item gets to the end, shove it into whatever's beside it. Now, we talked about there's another way to configure this machine, so I'm going to just break it and pop another one in. We're going to get the same setup we had before, and I mentioned that we could do it with the configurator. So if I mouse over the configurator, or mouse over the enrichment chamber with the configurator, you can see I've got a red block with what looks like a chest pictured in there. If I go to the front, it's gray with the chest. To the side, it's gray with the chest. This side is blue with a chest. This side is gray with a chest. That's showing you how it is currently set. So this is showing you that this side is set to input. Now if you don't remember that, just right click it, and it's going to show you current item behavior input. Now this is directly relational to what your configurator is set to. If we set it to items, fluids, gases, energy, or whatnot. So if I set this one to fluid and I mouse over, I see there's no setting changes because this machine does not in any way use fluids. So there's no settings to be made. So if I look at gases, you see this machine also does not use gases because none of the faces of the machine show a change. They do, however, use energy. So you see the lightning bolt and it's green. That tells you it can accept energy from all sides, including the one that it's currently plugged into. So what we want to do is set our configurator to items. There we go. And we want to look at the face we want to insert items into, and we want to shift, make sure you're holding shift, and right click, and we see it set to input. And now we get the marching ants. It's red, and it is sucking in all of the things to be turned into gold dust. So remember, you can configure using the side config tab or using your configurator, whatever works best for you. And it kind of depends on what's around the machine. Some machines are a little harder to get to in larger setups, so the configurator makes a lot more sense. Now, some machines, like this rotary condensator, have very specific sides that it wants things on. It's not configurable like these guys. So you notice it's got a tiny box here and a much larger box here. Now what this guy does is he takes fluids in and turns them into gases, or he takes gases in and turns them into fluids, either way. So there's only two things that can connect to it, and that's mechanical pipes and pressure tubes. And it wants the mechanical pipe on the large side, and it wants the pressure tube on the small side. Simple as that. If you try to connect the other one to it, it's going to be like, nope. So make sure you get the right cable to the right place. Now this particular machine, if you want to, say you had the gases coming from over here, because it's not configurable, you just simply pick up the machine and turn it around. So if you want it the other way, you do it this way. See, now they're different. It's about how you place the machine with this particular machine. Let me clear out my hotbar, and you can see it working over here. We're just taking in sulfuric acid, which is a gas. We're feeding in a gas. The machine's turning the gas into liquid and then sending it out through our mechanical pipes into this dynamic tank. And I've got a whole video on dynamic tanks if you're interested in them. They're basically just super large storage blocks, a multi-block structure that holds fluids in very, very large quantities. Now this particular machine has, again, multiple cable connections to it. You can see two small ones for gases and one big one for fluids. Again, make sure you get the right type of cable to the right connector so that it can do what it needs to do. Don't try to bring fluid in over here. There's no configuration for that because it has a designated spot it wants that fluid to come in at. Same with like the water pump. You can see that it's got a power connection here, which is green, and then a water connection here, which is red, or kind of orangey. Same with these. See how they're that kind of orangey, even though they're gas? It lets you know that's something other than power, where green is most definitely power. So we want that universal power cable connected to the green one. We want the fluid connected to the top, and then our pump will work. Now machines like this that have no defined inputs and outputs, these are the ones where you can kind of go buck wild and configure it whatever way you want it to. Kind of the sky's the limit in any way you want to go. So just make sure it's one that doesn't have any connectors. If there are designated connectors, you're connecting the right cable to the right place. So we want to look at all the different cables that Mekansim provides, and here they are. Of the 5 different types of transport methods, energy, heat, water, gas, and items, there are 4 of each one of those. So here's the logistical transporter, these transport items, and there's an easy way to tell what each of these cables does. If you just hold left shift, you see how it says items blocks there in kind of that purple color? it's just a quick way to see what that cable does. So pressurized tubes, if you can't remember, hold left shift, it says gases. Mechanical pipe, you can't remember. Oh, it's mechanical. Does it transport items or fluids? I can't remember. Hold left click or left shift, it tells you fluids. Thermodynamic connectors are heat, and universal cables are RF, EU, or joules. So each one of these types of cables has 4 different tiers. Each tier is faster or better than the tier before it. So if we were to look at, say, these universal cables, the basic level cable can send 1.28 thousand RF per tick. Then you go up to the advanced level, and every one of them has the 4 tiers are the same: basic, advanced, elite, and ultimate. Basic, advanced, elite, and ultimate. So, if you see ultimate, that's the best. If you see advanced, that's the second tier. If you see elite, that's the third tier across all of them. So if we look at advanced, it can do 5.12 thousand RF, so it's quite a bit better than the basic. If we look at the elite, it's 25.6, so it's way better than the advanced. If we look at the ultimate, it's 128,000 RF per tick, so way better than even the elite. So they go up dynamically across the range. Now, of course, they take a lot more resources to make an ultimate cable than it does to make a basic cable. Now, there are 2 different additional cables. These both work with the logistical transporters, and I'm not going to get into what they do here because it would take a lot longer, but I do want to make you aware they do exist, and I have seen cases where people have said, Blix, it's not working the way it's supposed to. It's because they had these in line when they should not have. So be careful not to use them where you don't need them. Make sure you know what you're doing when you do use them. So you've got the restrictive transporter and the diversion transporter. Looking at connecting non-Mekanism devices to Mekanism. So I've got nothing in this chest, but I've got a stack of emeralds in this chest. How would I get the emeralds from here to here? Well, looking at this setup, I can see that my cable is set to extract from this chest and it'll insert over here. Well, that's backwards of what I want. So I'm going to use my configurator, make sure it's set to items. I'm going to shift and click over here. Now it went away, so I'm not going to click here because that's going to change the color. So I'm going to come over here on the end and I'm going to shift click and get it pointed back into that chest. And then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to set this guy to pull. And you see the emeralds are starting to flow. Now I've got a little setup here where I've done exactly that, and then I've done an additional setup where we just run them around the backside, and that's just so you can gauge the different tiers of cables and how fast they actually move items. Now with fluids and heat and gases, you really can't see that. It's not visual, but with these logistical transporter or with these logistical transporters, it's really obvious, the speed difference. So these are our basic cables, and you can see I've just got a bunch of emeralds, and we're moving them from one chest to another. And you see the little marching ants flow. It's individual emeralds moving down, and I believe it's 2 every 1 second. Now, if I look at this advanced cable, you can see they're starting to group up, and I believe these group in 16s. It'll send 16 at a time and shoot them across, and they're actually moving considerably quicker. If we look at these basic logistical transporters, so let's look at each one real quick. We see this one's speed is 1 meter per second, but it'll pull 2 out at a time. The advanced is 2 meters per second, so it's double the speed, but it'll pull 32 out at a time. The elite is 4 meters per second, so double that speed, and it pulls 64 out at a time. And the ultimate is 10 meters a second, so more than double, and it pulls 2 stacks out at a time. Or per second, I should say. So we can see items bunching up, and we can see them moving quite a bit quicker with the advanced. If we come over to the elite, we can see them moving even faster and bunching up even more. And if we come to the ultimate, you just see them whizzing around as multi-stacks are actually flowing at the same time, super-de-dupe quick. So that, I mean, they're gone as fast as they come back pretty much. Now you might ask yourself, can you mix and match the cables? And the answer is yes, you can. So you can see I've got basic logistical cables here, or transporters here, which flow into Elite, or Advanced, which flow into Elite, which flow into Ultimate. You can see as the emeralds hit the transition, they speed up even quicker and just zip right on in there super fast. And you can see the same exact thing happen around the backside back here. So by the time they hit the basic, they slow down considerably. Now, one thing I want to show you that you can do with this that I don't really see a lot of people use, but it's a super cool feature and it'll save you a ton of resources. Do the exact same thing, but reverse it. Put the ultimate cable at the beginning by the chest, because remember, this guy extracts much quicker and moves much faster. So what he's going to do is he's going to bundle up the items for you and shoot them down to where they hit the basic cable. Now when they hit the basic cable, they're still going to be bundled, which is super nice. You can see just stacks of cables or of emeralds coming in at one time versus our setup over here where it was one at a time. And then I've got the same deal over here where it stacks them up and then shoots them down. Now where this would come in super handy would be like if you had a mob farm off in the distance and you wanted to bring all those different items into your storage system at one time. You know, you get a whole bunch of bones at one time, a whole bunch of arrows, a whole bunch of rotten flesh, a whole bunch of gunpowder all at the same time. And you want to kind of stack it up to ship it out so it's not bogging down. These ultimate cables are great for that, but they're really, really expensive. Well, you can produce just one of them. Put it right here off the chest. You don't need this whole line like I have. This is just for graphical representation, so it's real easy for your eyeball to see what's happening. But you could put one ultimate cable right here and run the entire rest of the link with basic cable, and it's going to stack them up nice and neat just like this for you. So it's going to move an entire chest worth of emeralds very, very rapidly, even though the cable itself moves fairly slow because you get that nice stacking from the ultimate cable. Again, I don't see a lot of people use this, but it's a great feature within Mekanism. But I do think that is going to do it as we take a look at all the different ways to transport items, fluids, gases, heat, and power within Mekanism, and how to configure, most importantly, how to configure all those settings to make it actually work for you. So if you got any questions, drop them in the down yonder. I'll do my best to answer them if I can. But until next time, you guys, get out there and make some noise. See ya.